Smashed by the Bankers Part 4. Here we go. Judy and Brad tried to locate me. When Judy and Corey got to the house, Judy called her boss to tell her something was amiss and that she wouldn't be at work the next day as she had to go find out what happened. Her boss said that she had just heard there was going to be a press conference and Mir Henry was going to make a public announcement regarding the events at our ranch. Judy and Corey quickly turned on the radio. He said they'd taken me to Pierre. Fearing the worst, Judy called the hospital. They said I wasn't there, and she felt relieved thinking if I wasn't there, at least they hadn't hurt me. Oh, how wrong she was. Next, she called the jail. They said I was there, I was being processed, and she couldn't talk to me for at least 45 minutes. About that time, Brad walked in. Judy gathered together a few clothes and made arguments for Corey to stay with a friend, and that she and Brad left for Pierre. They went right to jail. It's 128 miles from Mobridge to Pierre. So when they arrived, it was about 10 p.m. There was a little intercom system at the door, so she pushed the button and asked to see me. They told her I wasn't there. She said, "You're lying! I called about 2.5 hours ago and you said you were processing him. Now you tell me he's not there? If you don't have him, what have you done with him?" "We have been instructed to give no further information to anyone," was their reply. And Judy demanded to know who would give her the information because she was going to find her husband whether they wanted her to or not. They told her to go to Mir Henry's office. She asked where that was, and in the Capitol building, and so she asked if it was open at this time of night, and they said they didn't know. Why didn't she go find out? That is exactly what they did. They drove around to the Capitol complex until they found a lighted doorway on the back side. The door was unlocked, so they went in. There were very few lights on. The Capitol building is a huge old building with many stairways, hallways, closed doors, and with hardly any lights on, no one around, they couldn't find Mir Henry's office. They just kept walking and searching and were about ready to give up. As they leaned against the wall by the Supreme Court chambers, they could faintly hear voices. They breathed a sigh of relief and started searching for the source of those voices. They followed the sound, and as they got closer to the light, they found the press room. 2 reporters were there. Judy identified herself and stated she was looking for Byron Dale. The reporters asked a few questions and finally admitted that they knew somewhat of what had happened. They even had photos of the trucks that were at our place loading our equipment. They denied any knowledge of my whereabouts, though. They told her that they were the only ones in the building except for maintenance people, and that Mir Henry was at Rapid City at the state Class A basketball tournament. So they asked Judy what she was going to do to find Byron. She asked to use the phone, saying if they don't have Byron in jail, and if he isn't here, the next logical place to check was back at the hospital. So she called St. Mary's there in Pierre. The gal answering the phone said she couldn't give out any information, but she would get the head nurse, and she probably could find him. When the head nurse came on the line, she told Judy in a very hushed tone, "Yes, we have your husband here. If you come to the northwest door and ring the buzzer, I'll let you in and show you where to go." So Judy and Brad left immediately and went to the hospital. By then, it was about 11 p.m. They were led in and directed to the elevators and told to go to the nurses' station on the 2nd floor. At the 2nd floor nurses' station, they were met by 2 policemen. They made Judy and Brad identify themselves and radioed to someone that what they should do, what should they do with them after they radioed in. Because they're just 2 people looking for this bashed guy, you know. And the police act weird, watch this. They were instructed to only let in immediate family members And then after being thoroughly searched, Brad was almost to my door when the officer turned and stopped him and searched him. By this time, his temperament wasn't congenial. He raised his arms, did a 360 turn, and said, "What you see here is what there is." And now I'm going in to see my dad, and kept right on walking. The officer looked at each other and put their hands on their guns as if to stop him, but they didn't go any further. Brad walked right by and came into my room. Awesome. Let me turn the page here. They stopped Judy, though, and said she had to be searched, but the law prevented men from doing it. They would have to call a matron over from the jail. She said, "Baloney to that noise." She gave her purse to the nurse on duty, took off her jacket, raised her arms, did a 360 turn, and said, "Any dummy can see I don't have a weapon. Now I'm going in. If you don't like it, come on in with me." And she came into my room. That's awesome. She and Brad were terribly upset when they saw me. I mean, look at him. Look at that. They beat him to a pulp, guys. By the time they got there, my face was swollen beyond recognition. Judy reached for my hand to make sure it was me. It looked like they had taken out my left eye. Now here's an image on the back part of the book here. Let me make sure I save that part. But here's a couple of more pictures of Byron here. That, I mean, it's really messed up. If you guys can see that. Byron Dale shortly after attack being beaten by law officers. I mean, he was completely bloodied up. And I just wanted to show that again. So, she and Brad were terribly upset when they saw me. By the time they got there, my face was swollen beyond recognition. Judy reached for my hand to make sure it was me. It looked like they had taken out my left eye. In order to check the dilation of my eyes, it took two nurses, one to hold the swollen tissues apart and the other to shine the light in my eye. Jeez, man. Here, let me put the camera over here. Be a little bit easier. Okay. So, just before Judy and Brad found me, the head of the Department of Criminal Investigation had come to read my rights. He told me I hadn't been officially charged with anything yet. I confronted him with, if I haven't been charged with anything yet, why was I beaten up, hauled 150 miles, been in 2 hospitals, put in jail, and have 2 armed guards standing by my door? That's a good question. He got red in the face, but didn't give me any answer. Yeah, of course he didn't. He's nothing to say. All the family came to see me on Sunday. They had to go through the search routine every time they got out of sight of the officers. They even made my wife unbutton her blouse and jeans completely, expose herself. To do this, of course, they had brought a matron from the jail. Okay, at least they did that. But that's like the TSA. That's just like the TSA. That's what tyrannies do, is they touch you. They touch you, man. That's what they want to do. They want to get in your body space. They want to take all of your bubble away from you. My father-in-law and brother-in-law flew down from Billings to visit. They were totally amazed at the beating I had been given. Leonard, my brother-in-law, said no way all the world they ever would be able to get away with that, what they did to me. Little did he know how much of a police state America has become. Sunday afternoon, Judy called Mayor Henry at his office and reminded him that she was still waiting for that telephone call he had promised her. If they were going to the ranch, she said she had heard via the grapevine he intended to go to the ranch, and wondered what he was going to keep his promise and when he was going to keep his promise and call. Then she told him they had been under armed guard, but we hadn't been informed what Byron had committed, and wondered what they had come up with for a crime. Like, what was the charge here? Mayor Henry said he couldn't discuss the case with her and hung up on her. Jeez. I told my family about the pictures. I can't believe he hung up on her, though. Jeez. I told my family about the pictures. Judy was really concerned that if we would never get them back, nothing in our experience so far led her to believe anything said by an employee of the state. They just cannot be relied on. She and her big brother from Montana went to the jail to get my things. When they brought the bag of clothes, etc., sure enough, everything was there but the pictures. No one seemed to know what had happened to them. Judy showed them the list signed by the sheriff providing the pictures had been there, and they were indeed responsible for them. If they were not there, they had better come up with a good reason why not, and quickly. So there he is again. I mean, geez, dude. They stuttered around a bit. Then one of them admitted that someone from the Attorney General's office had come earlier that day and taken them. Attorney General's office? And they didn't even say who it was. They refused to identify the person. Judy wanted that statement in writing. They refused. The best she could do is get out of them was a signed statement that they had given her my possessions and listed them. However, the pictures were not on the list, so it doesn't matter what they're covering this up. Judy and her brother did not know what to do, where to go to get my pictures back from the Attorney General. In disgust, they returned to my hospital room. Back in the room, members of the family decided that they should take some more pictures of me. Obviously, yeah, man. Judy's dad asked the officer in charge if he could bring a cameraman into my hospital room and take some pictures of me. The guards told him that he would not be permitted to do that. Jeez, dude. The family, except for Judy's dad, left to get something to eat. He stayed with me at the hospital. A couple hours later, they returned to the hospital. As usual, they stopped and were searched before they could come into my room. The last family member to come into my room closed the door and leaned against it so that it would not be opened unexpectedly. As if by magic, a small camera flash and bulbs appeared. Someone had smuggled the camera and flash bulbs through the search into my room. They proceeded to take more pictures of my battered, bruised, and swollen face. Yes! The film was then removed from the camera, and Judy took it out of the room and went to have a talk with some reporters who she had met the previous evening while searching for me. The next day, my battered, bruised, and swollen face was shown on TV and appeared in the papers. Yes, awesome. With that cast out of the bag, or with that cat out of the bag, sorry. Jeez. The Attorney General's office agreed to release the pictures, and they eventually returned to me. So, I mean, that's insane. You're not even allowed to take pictures of that guy after he got beaten to a pulp, basically, by a bunch of dudes. Like, it wasn't just one guy that beat him up either. He got jumped. I hate that. I've been jumped before. It's not fun. Monday morning, they summoned me out of the court for an arraignment hearing. I was still so weak from the beating and loss of blood that I had to be taken to court in a wheelchair. I appeared before the circuit court judge, Robert Miller. Dennis Holmes was the prosecuting attorney for the state. They had searched their law books and finally decided the most probable charges to get to stick were resisting legal processes and obstructing a law enforcement officer in the performance of his duty. Oh, that's his duty, to to beat him up. The state wanted to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation. They always do that. They always say, you're crazy, you're crazy. That's not how the system works. And then they throw you in jail. Here the judge didn't go along with their game. He stated that he did not have jurisdiction to make such a decision. He set a formal hearing for April 7th back in Carson County, where the crimes supposedly were committed. As for bail, they released me on my personal recognizance. Obviously, they didn't want to face the money issue. They were sure I would bring it up. They knew if they required a money bond, I would have asked the judge exactly what they wanted in payment. They say dollars, but not dollars of what? Byron Dale's awesome, man. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, they took the guards away from my door and finally could come and go at will. The press also came to visit with me, as did a lot of other people. One fellow I remember in particular was a young certified public accountant that knew my brother. He was called Lloyd and told him that he'd heard me and felt I was totally wrong. Lloyd listened to him for a while, then I can tell that it's really bothering you. Maybe before you make such a judgment, you should go talk with Byron. If you understand what he is really saying, maybe you wouldn't think him so wrong. Yeah, because that's what people do. They come up with these preconceived notions about people before they even talk to them. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, He took Lloyd's advice and came to visit with me. When he first came into my room, he was very nervous, but he got right to the point by stating, Mr. Dale, we must have money. We can't go back to the barter system. I'm sorry, that's hilarious. I replied, of course not. We must have money, a monetary system. Nobody, not even myself, wants to use hay and silage for a medium of exchange. I went on to explain, on the other hand, we cannot survive for very long using a system that mathematically will not function either. Here, let me show you. I had him get me my briefcase and pulled out a letter from the Department of the Treasury and literature from the Federal Reserve Bank that said, all money is created as debt and loaned into existence. A good friend of mine had given me a sack of Hershey Candy Kisses. I picked them up and said, okay, here's how our money system works. Let's say that these Candy Kisses are money. Let's say that our government has passed a law that only Byron Dale can make them, and everyone else must use them for money. And the only way anyone else could get them is to borrow them from me. Of course. They must pay interest for the use of my money. Here, I will loan you 10 of them. I will charge you 10% interest, and you must give me your watch for collateral, just in case you cannot repay me. Isn't that the way it's done at the banks today? He answered, yes. Then I informed him, now that I have loaned you 10, I guess I will shut down a loaning. I then closed the sack tightly. I don't care what you do with your 10 kisses, but in a little while I want you to repay me the 10 I loaned you, plus 1 for interest. If you can't, then you must give me your watch. He looked at me for a minute, then his face lit up. He was finally realized what I've been trying to get across all along. That is impossible to give back 11 when all there was in circulation was 10. But he had been tricked out of his watch. Shortly he left, taking his watch with him. That was awesome. A couple of days later, Lloyd called to tell me that the young CPA went to a prayer breakfast meeting that day after our visit and explained to the others present that Byron Dale was obviously correct. Absolutely correct, sorry. I laid in the hospital all that week. It took a couple of days to get steady enough so I could even walk a few feet to the bathroom, jeez. After I was sufficiently steady on my feet, I had to go back to the jail and be checked out. For an entire month, in returning home, I couldn't do much but sleep. I did try to keep up with the mail and other papers that kept accumulating. I discovered there had been a judgment to take our property away, and that the court had an ex parte hearing without my knowledge. This was done on Wednesday, March 16th. At this hearing, they decided that they didn't know what to do to get my property because they didn't have any judgment against me. They couldn't take my property without notifying me first, and they didn't want to notify me at all. The judge didn't feel they had any just cause to shorten any time requirements. However, Ron Johnson assured them, even though he didn't have any reason at the time, he was sure he would in the next few days. So you see, under South Dakota law, you can't execute a judgment for 20 days after the judgment is signed unless there is a good cause shown. They called the Attorney General and asked him what they could do. Mayor Henry told them if they wanted to get the stuff, to go ahead and do so. And he'd come to help. So then on the 18th, they drafted an order, flew it out to the judge for his signature, and flew it back to the courthouse and supposedly filed it by 4:30 that afternoon. Anyway, that's what they testified in court. However, the state's attorney would not verify that. He squirmed in his seat and said, "That's not what they told me." Or, "That's what they told me," sorry. With our experience with their word, I'm not convinced that this was true. So, who are our civil servants serving? That's the question here. There are laws, common law, constitutional, and statutory as well. It's God's law that protect the rights of citizens, and our civil servants are expected to follow these laws. However, many do not. I'll cite a few key laws, and you decide who these civil servants are serving, the bankers or you and me. To bereave a man of life by violence or to confiscate his estate without accusation or trial would go so gross and notorious as an act of despotism, as must at once convey the alarm of tyranny throughout the whole kingdom. Sir William Blackstone. Commentaries on the Law, Book 1, Chapter 1, page 136. And that's the privileges and immunities of citizens in the United States protected by the 14th Amendment are those arising out of the nature and essential character of the federal government and granted or secured by the Constitution, and the due process of law and equal protection of the law are secured if the laws operate for all alike and do not subject the individual to an arbitrary exercise. Of the powers of government, Duncan versus Missouri, 152 U.S. 382, 14, Sup. CT 570, 28, 1, ED 485. Sorry about all the numbers. If the destruction of our Constitution and loss of freedom was not so important, all of what has happened to us would be kind of funny. It would be a joke. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10 states, "No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin as tender in payment of debts." South Dakota Codified Law 3423 states, "It shall be unlawful in any note, mortgage, or other evidence of indebtedness to insert any clause or provision requiring the interest, principal, or any part thereof to be paid in gold, silver, paper, or any particular kind of money, and any note mortgage, or other evidence of indebtedness shall be deemed fully paid and satisfied when the specific amount due therein is tendered in any money." Okay? SDCL 57A 234 states, "Price payable in money, goods, realty, or otherwise." SDCL 57A 253 states, "A tender must be at a reasonable hour, and if it is of goods, then they must be kept available for a period reasonably necessary to enable the buyer to take possession." Okay, let me read that one again. A tender must be at a reasonable hour, and if it is of goods, sorry, I'm going to read it one more time, guys. Sorry. A tender must be at a reasonable hour, and if it is of goods, they must be kept available for a period reasonably necessary to enable the buyer to take possession. Okay, you get it. SDCL 57A3604 states, where the maker or acceptor of an instrument payable otherwise than on demand is able to ready to pay at every place of payment specified in the instrument when it is due, it is equivalent to tender. And then Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, says, tender, though usually used in connection with an offer to pay money, is properly used in connection with an offer to property other than money. I'm sorry, guys. It's like kind of cursive-y writing here. Borrowers are in a bind. There are no gold or silver coins in circulation. So when I relied on the above stated South Dakota laws, the courts ruled that I couldn't pay in goods, that I must pay in Federal Reserve notes. What a pickle we Americans are in, huh? We can't pay in goods we raise. We must use only Federal Reserve notes, which only come into the existence as a debt loan. We must go into debt or sell our goods and force someone else into debt, so there are Federal Reserve notes available to us to pay with. If we will not borrow or force someone else to borrow, then the lenders come and take the goods or property from us by force. And then they pay the very bills they denied our payment for. That is a big joke, man. Robert H. Hemphill, credit manager for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta for 8 years, had this to say. If all the bank loans were paid, no one would have a bank deposit, and there would not be a dollar of coin or currency in circulation. Jeez, that's crazy. It's like Chuck E. Cheese. We're like, oh my God, it's fake money, guys. This is a staggering thought. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have in circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we prosper. If not, we starve. When a person understates the complete picture of this tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is almost incredible. But there it is. The banking problem is the most important subject intelligent people can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it becomes widely understood and the defects remedied very soon. The defect is very simple to understand. Money is created when loans are issued and debts incurred. Money is extinguished when loans are paid. After a borrower spends his loan, some existing money from someone else's loan in circulation must be acquired by the borrower to repay the loan principal plus interest. When the loan is paid and the money is returned to the bank, it is withdrawn from circulation. Report number 83-125B, Congressional Research Service, page 29. To simplify the above, let's take this example. If two people each get a loan of $1, there would be $2 in circulation. But if 10% interest is charged, the total debt outstanding would be $2.20 because of the 10% interest. When it comes time for the first man to repay his loan, he would need to obtain $1.10 for the total $2 in circulation. This leaves the second man owing $1.10, but there is only 90 cents left in circulation with which to pay the $1.10 in debt. So you can never pay back the debt mathematically, guys. Okay? Mathematically, it can't happen. Multiply the above example by hundreds and thousands of loans over a long span of time, And it's easy to understand why we have less than 600 billion of money in circulation to repay a government debt of 2 trillion and climbing every day. This is years ago, guys. Sorry. That's why I'm going to read Greg Soderbergh's book next. Thank you for your service, and that will update us. Okay, so this is just getting into the history of this. Okay, so bear with me here. Add to that 2 trillion government debt, the 9 trillion of private debt also growing every day. Under our present money system, there must be an ever-increasing debt to keep the game going until we either return to the debt-free money system upon which our nation was founded, or we will have a collapse. That's what happened in the Roman Empire. When Rome collapsed, cities were ransacked, fortresses leveled, churches burned, monasteries destroyed, fields wasted, and the real areas abandoned. The real areas. I think it meant rural areas abandoned, so that the wild beasts supplanted the place of men. These are facts which no one can deny. See Europe in the Middle Ages by Duncan, Volume 1, page 229. There you go. Debt-free money would solve the problem and prevent collapse. The collapse of today's civilization does not have to happen. A return to a debt-free money system would avoid that. This could be accomplished in one of two ways. We could return to using gold and silver coin issued into circulation without being loaned, or by simply having the United States Treasury issue the paper money and spend it into circulation. Simple. Very simple, guys. And we could solve all these problems that we have with money. The spending of the paper money would be limited to the building of roads, which would be of equal benefit for all. Since roads can only be built by labor, in reality, all that would be done would be to monetize labor. As the money was spent, it would flow into circulation, and we would all have debt-free money. With which to meet our needs for a medium of exchange based on labor performed and production produced. You see, the unpaid interest caused by our present debt money system increases taxes. This ever-increasing interest in taxes is the real cause of inflation. So that's a good place to stop for now. I got a half hour in, and I'm going to continue very soon. I'm just going to take a break here.